Hello. How are you? I'm so excited to be coming to you live today on this beautiful day. It was really cold this morning, but the sun is shining, as you can see on my radiant face. I'm really excited. Today's epic. Today is super epic. So I'm excited to be here with y'all. I'm really excited to talk about my unlikely foray into prophecy. So I titled this talk How I Became an Unlikely Prophet. And I want to start out a little bit by talking about how that word makes me super uncomfortable. But first, I'm just going to share this with some people to see if you can see me. And if you're here, make sure you say hello to me. Otherwise, I don't know you're here. And that makes me sad. So let me know that you know I'm here. And I'm just going to share this on my other page. And then we'll get started. Join me live. Okay, that's some sauce. So if you're here, let me know. I would love to see you show up in my comments in my feed. And otherwise, Facebook doesn't tell me that you are here. So welcome here. So I am very excited to talk to you a little bit about my unlikely foray into being called a prophet. So I did not start out calling myself a prophet. I don't think that's something that most prophets do, I'm guessing. They're like, wake up one day and be like, yo, I'm a prophet. I don't think that's how it works. But I grew up in Utah, as many of you know. For those of you that are new to the bird world, I grew up in Utah, born and raised. And I used to joke and say, but I'm okay. And I grew up in Utah, and I did not grow up LDS or Mormon. And so for me, the prophet was the leader of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church. So I was always uncomfortable with that word because of what the prophet symbolized to me, especially as a queer woman. And so I was always super uncomfortable with the word prophet. And then when I moved to Oregon and I started doing this work that I'm doing now, a lot of people started calling me a prophet, especially diehard Christian people. And it really freaked me out because I did not like the term at all. I was like, no, this makes me really uncomfortable. Let's think of something else. And then last summer, I got this email from, I'm connected to these emails. It was a meditation from the Center for Action and Contemplation. And Richard Rohr is the person who runs the center. And there was a 2-week series on the prophets. And I don't know much about prophets. And it really resonated with me. So I started looking more into prophets. And I started asking my friend Amy, who you've seen with me live here many times, about prophecy and prophets and who her favorite prophets were. And I started asking questions about prophets. And finally, as God does, I just needed the 2x4 smacking me across the face a bunch for me to admit that I do believe I am indeed a prophet, which is freaky. So I'm going to tell you, I'm just going to talk about that. I'm just going to read what I wrote. So the first sign that I was a prophet to me was that I was listening to someone talk and they said, prophets call bullshit when they see it. And I was like, well, I call bullshit when I see it. So that's a really good description of me. And part of my prophecy and part of what I'm doing in the world is sort of following this idea that it's time to disrupt the social norms that call for polarization. So I believe that this polarization that we're experiencing currently in the United States is intentional in order to defeat the rise of community building and connection and the rise of us coming together in the middle. And I think this polarization right now we are being called to build relationships based on commonalities, and the polarization, you're either Republican or you're Democrat. You're either with us or you're not. You're either straight or you're gay. You're this or you're that. You're either fat or you're skinny. You're either beautiful or you're ugly. Like the polarization, the all or nothing thinking that we have in this country, I think right is problematic. And I once heard Caitlyn Curtis say, in a perfect world, feminism wouldn't be controlled by the patriarchy. Hi, Tansy. How are you? In a perfect world, feminism wouldn't be controlled by the patriarchy. And so I believe that part of my prophecy is to call bullshit when I see it, and to start to have us think about how we can build relationships based on our commonalities instead of our differences, so that we focus on our commonalities and our differences move to the periphery of our conversations, so that we can really be connected with each other in the middle, because I think that's where most of us live. The second reason I think that I am a prophet, and the second thing that sort of hit me like a ton of bricks when I started embracing this idea, was that prophets shed light in dark spaces. So prophets shed light in dark spaces that are meant to keep people out. So back when I wrote my Emancipation of a Minor bill, which is the first law I ever wrote and got passed, I wrote it on my dining room table way back when I was getting my master's degree back in 2003. And when I wrote that bill on my dining room table, it died the first year. So like at 11:59 and 59 seconds, the last day of the legislative session, my bill died on the floor. It was very sad. And I immediately the next day went and got a tattoo on my back that was the suffrage motto. And it says, "Forward out of darkness, forward into light." Well, I thought that that was just part of the suffrage movement. It was on their banners. It was part of one of their songs. It was part of their writing. And I thought that was it. What I didn't realize until last year when I was sitting in church listening to the gospel is that it's actually part of the gospel. So this idea of shedding light in dark spaces so that people can be renewed, also so that people can see the injustices that the empire is putting on people, is another reason that I am a prophet. So this idea of prophecy and prophets who shed light in dark spaces. So I have examples about people who shed light in dark spaces. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. sheds light, was a prophet, shed light in dark spaces. Mary Magdalene was a prophet who shed light in dark spaces. Anna Palmer, Gloria Steinem, all the witches. Bell Hooks, Jane Addams, Harriet Tubman, Hagar, who is from the Bible, who was the only person to utter God's real name, who was a prostitute and a slave. Archangela Terabati, who wrote a book about how immoral it was that the Catholics in Italy would enslave their daughters in nunneries, even if they weren't called to the cloister. All the female punk rockers are prophets. Eartha Kitt, Helen Keller, Hillary Clinton, Sojourner Truth. All of these people shed light in dark spaces. And so bell hooks. So I really encourage us to think about not just today's prophets, but also the prophecy of people in the past who have led us out of darkness into light and shed light on the dark spaces in our own history. Because when people take the risk to speak their truth, even when they're facing death or silencing, they become a different form of rebel and they become a prophet. And so I really want to have us think about that and think about the way we engage with people in that way. The third way that I am a prophet is that prophets cannot be at the center of any social structure. So this is really what hit me and struck me about this email from Richard Rohr talking about the prophets. So prophets are not at the middle of any social structure. They're usually sitting on the edge of a social structure, which is basically where I live. I mean, I'm a bisexual woman who is a feminist, who used to be a lobbyist for Planned Parenthood, who has all of these things about me that sort of make up who I am. I'm a stepmother, but I'm also a mother. I'm I'm all these things, and I'm unapologetic about being all of these things that make up the entirety of who I am. So prophets are on the edge of the inside. They're not fully inside, but they also can't, they're not fully on the fringes. So one of the things I love about this, what Richard Rohr says about prophecy, is that a true prophet must be educated inside the system. Hello, bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD. Knowing and living the rules before they can critique what is non-essential or not so important. So in my prophecy, in my day-to-day life, and when I'm talking about the graceful revolution and the natural born rebel, I'm educated inside the system. I know and live the rules, and I am able to critique what is non-essential or not so important. One of the things that I think is non-essential or not so important is the patriarchy. One of the things that I think is non-essential and not so important is misogyny. One of the things that I think is not essential and not so important is the idea of polarization and keeping people separate. And so I really love how he talks about that prophets hold the tension of the opposites, which is part of the necessary education of the prophet. And I feel that tension every single day of my life. Hello, Libra balance magic. So I hold that tension of opposites pretty much regularly. And so the idea that as a rule breaker and a rebel and the entirety of who I am lends itself perfectly to being a prophet and having prophecy. So there's three things I want to say before I wrap this up. The first thing I want to say is that I am a rule breaker who infiltrates the membranes of power to disrupt the dehumanization that is rampant in our current political climate. We have got to stop dehumanizing each other. The reason that we are able to walk by homeless people on the street and not do anything or say anything is because we have dehumanized them as people. The reason we are able to shut an eye off to what's happening at the border with children in cages is because we have been able to dehumanize the children that are sitting in those walls. I believe that we have to infiltrate the membranes of power to disrupt the dehumanization that is rampant in this country. The second way that I am a prophet is that I am a truth teller. And I believe that if we tell the truth and the stories of our lived experiences, that change will take place in America and in the world. And I think it's really important for us to think about how we can change the narrative of what is happening in this country. And we do that by telling our truth and telling our stories as we have experienced the world. And I believe that if we continue to do this, it's going to change and disrupt the dehumanization and the narrative that we have about the social norm of polarization and keeping us separate. I think that if we come together and start speaking to each other about our stories and seek commonalities with each other, it's going to change the narrative about how we operate in the United States and in the world. The last thing I want to say, and this came to me as I was reading some of the final words from Richard Rohr's email that I received last summer, is this idea that the voices of the marginalized, the voices of women, people of color, LGBT people, the poor, disabled people, how they read the gospel, how I read the gospel is very different than how people who are in power, white, heterosexual, cisgendered men read the Bible and read the gospel. I read and preach the gospel. Hello, Tiffany. I read and preach the gospel not from the perspective of empire Christianity, not from the refrain of protecting the patriarchy, but from the lens of the oppressed, the chalice of the matriarchy, and the language of the rebel. That is how I know that I am well and truly, as people have called me, a prophet. Because every heartache, every struggle, every fear has led me to this moment where my lessons are everyone's lessons. So if you expand into the unknown, you never know what's on the other side of your fear. So the idea of falling into your calling and into who you were put here, your divine calling and your divine purpose, can sometimes be super scary. But if you are willing to breathe into your rebellion and take that risk, you will be able to disrupt the narrative of how all of this in the world is supposed to look. And if you look to the calling of the people who have come before us, people like Sally Ride, Cleopatra, Jesus, Lindy West, Pink, all of these people who have come before us, if you look at those people and you look to how they express themselves, you will realize that those rebels, who are often prophets themselves, show us how to move forward out of darkness and forward into light. And so I really encourage you all to go and think about the people in your own life who have taught you how to be a rebel and who have taught you how to think outside the structure and the refrain of protecting the patriarchy. And it doesn't have to be people who are necessarily out there pounding their fists and engaging in outward acts of what you believe to be revolution. Oftentimes, the greatest prophets and the greatest rebels are the ones who are quietly sitting by, just on that edge of society, working to disrupt a system that doesn't work and was never meant to work, because it's not what the law of love has written for us. So I hope this has been interesting for you. This is a really complicated thing for me to talk about, because I really had a hard time embracing the idea of being a prophet and having a prophecy. But I truly believe that the Graceful Revolution is my prophecy to be telling, mostly because it came to me in a dream in the middle of the night, and I believe that that was the voice of God talking to me. But also because I grew up in a society that told me that women couldn't be prophets and that that was impossible. And so I'm really enjoying the idea that through my own work and through my own public expression of who I am, I will not only encourage others to come out and speak their own truth, but I will be shedding light into the darkness so that all of us can rise up and dismantle these systems of oppression and these social norms that are keeping people stuck, and continuing to allow people who would be in power to perpetuate these horrible ideas of racism and sexism and misogyny. So I hope you've enjoyed this. It's been really lovely seeing you. Also, is my hair kicking? I'm just saying. I hope you have a super good day. Bye.